August 19, 1944. Paris had been under German occupation for more than 4 long years. A city once alive with laughter and light had fallen into a silence of fear and hunger. The tricolor flags were hidden under mattresses, the radios whispered forbidden news from London, and every street carried the heavy boots of the occupier. As a historian, I can tell you that by that date, the liberation of Paris was not part of the original Allied plan. After the D-Day landings in June, the focus was on pushing east, toward the Seine River, then Germany itself. But history is rarely neat. Paris was not only a city, it was a symbol. For the French, it was the soul of their nation. And in the heat of that summer, that soul was ready to fight back. Inside the city, the French resistance, the Forces Françaises de l'Intérieur, had begun an uprising. Police officers defected, barricades appeared in the streets, and the red, white, and blue flag of France flew once again from rooftops. The people of Paris, armed with little more than rifles and courage, rose against their occupiers. And as they did, the world watched. The Allies could not ignore it. Free French forces under General Philippe Leclerc and the U.S. Third Army were ordered to move toward the city. What followed would become one of the most dramatic and emotional moments of the entire war. August 20, 1944. The city was now a battleground. German troops, under General Dietrich von Choltitz, held key government buildings and intersections. But ammunition was running low, and morale even lower. For 5 days, Parisians fought street to street, makeshift barricades of cobblestones and buses blocking tanks, students throwing Molotov cocktails, and resistance fighters sniping from windows. I often tell my students, history is written not only by generals, but by ordinary people. In Paris, that truth was alive in every alley. While the Allies raced toward the city, Parisians fought to reclaim their own destiny. Von Choltitz, the German commander, had received direct orders from Adolf Hitler himself, to destroy Paris rather than let it fall. Bridges were to be blown, monuments reduced to rubble. Is Paris burning? Hitler would later ask in fury. And yet, remarkably, von Choltitz hesitated. Perhaps it was exhaustion, perhaps a final moment of humanity, but he defied that command. Meanwhile, to the south, General Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division, a unit filled with Free French troops, Spanish Republicans, and supported by American armor, pushed forward through the countryside. The sounds of liberation were coming closer, the deep rumble of Shermans, the sharp crack of rifles, and the faint echo of church bells. Paris was waiting for her saviors. August 22, 1944. The Allied columns reached the outskirts of the city. The 2nd French Armored Division, followed by units of the U.S. 4th Infantry Division, advanced cautiously. They knew the risk, street fighting in a city as dense as Paris could turn into a massacre. But when the first tanks crossed into the suburbs, the reaction was electric. Civilians poured into the streets, waving flags, crying, embracing soldiers. Les Américains. Les Français libres, they shouted. The scenes were chaotic, joyful, and heartbreaking all at once. Imagine this, tanks rolling down the Boulevard Saint-Michel, flowers thrown onto them from balconies, women weeping, men saluting through tears. Resistance fighters pointed out sniper nests while children handed soldiers bottles of wine. Paris was breathing again. I've read diaries from those days, entries written in trembling handwriting, and they all describe the same feeling, disbelief. After years of occupation, people could not quite believe they were free. But the fighting was not yet done. German units still held parts of the city center, including the Hôtel de Ville and the Isle de la Cité. The next 48 hours would decide everything. August 24, 1944. That night, just before midnight, a small detachment of French tanks, led by Captain Raymond Dron, reached the Hôtel de Ville. They were the first Allied troops to enter the heart of Paris. The moment was both military and poetic. Bells rang across the city as word spread, the French are here. The next morning, full Allied columns followed. The thunder of tank tracks echoed off the walls of the Champs-Élysées. Crowds swelled, chanting, singing, crying. The tricolor flag flew from the Eiffel Tower once more. On August 25, General von Choltitz formally surrendered to Leclerc and the Free French forces inside the Préfecture de Police. The city was saved, intact, alive, and unbroken. The cost was high, around 1,500 resistance fighters and civilians killed, but Paris was free again. When you study history, you learn that every war has its moment of light amid the darkness. For France, that moment came not with bombs or conquest, but with unity, a city reclaiming its soul. August 26, 1944. The world watched as General Charles de Gaulle marched down the Champs-Élysées, head held high, through seas of cheering Parisians. It was not a triumphal parade in the Roman sense, but a statement: France stands, and France fights. De Gaulle had insisted that the liberation be led by French troops, not only for symbolism, but for dignity. And that decision would echo through history. From a historian's lens, this day marked the rebirth of French sovereignty. Allied forces, American, British, Canadian, had made it possible, but it was the French who walked through their own capital. The images, captured by war correspondents, traveled the world, soldiers embracing civilians, flags waving, church bells ringing for the first time since 1940. And in the background, quietly, the Allies continued their advance. While Paris celebrated, the war raged on to the east, toward the Seine, the Rhine, and eventually Berlin. The liberation of Paris was not the end. It was a beginning, a symbol that tyranny could fall, and hope could return. September 1944. In the weeks that followed, Paris began to heal. Streetcars ran again, cafes reopened, and musicians played once more in the city squares. But under that joy lay scars, the memory of hunger, fear, and loss. As a historian, it's vital to remind my students that liberation is never clean. It is earned, paid for in blood and time. American, British, and Canadian troops moved onward toward Germany, while the French rebuilt what occupation had broken. Von Choltitz sat in captivity, later admitting that he could not destroy the most beautiful city in the world. His defiance, ironic as it was, helped save Paris from ruin. Today, when we walk those same streets, it's easy to forget the noise, the fear, the smell of smoke that once filled the air. But every August, when the bells ring across the Seine and flags wave on the Champs-Élysées, we remember. Paris was liberated not just by armies, but by a people who refused to let their spirit die. And that, I always tell my students, is the true power of history, not the battles themselves, but what they awaken in the hearts of those who survive.